Welcome to another deep dive, and today we're going to be looking at Adam Grant's Give and Take.
Okay.
Have you had a chance to look at this one?
Oh yeah. I really enjoyed this book actually.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's really fascinating. It kind of challenges our assumptions about what it takes to get ahead in the world.
Hmm.
We always think that, it's the takers, the aggressive ones
Yeah.
that climb to the top. But
It seems intuitive, right?
it does seem intuitive, right?
Yeah.
And but he's got some research and some stories that suggest that it's not always the case.
Well, and he doesn't just say that. He actually backs it up with a ton of research.
Right.
So it's not just opinion.
Yeah.
He's got data from psychology, sociology, economics
Okay.
to really support these different reciprocity styles.
So we're talking about givers and takers, and there's one more, isn't there?
Matchers.
Matchers. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about these three styles and
Mm.
how they play out.
So, givers are people who really enjoy helping others. They lead with generosity and contribution, and they don't necessarily expect anything in return.
Okay.
Takers, on the other hand, are all about maximizing their own self-interest.
Oh.
They're always looking to get ahead, even if it means stepping on other people.
Okay.
And then matchers kind of fall in the middle.
Right.
They believe in fairness and reciprocity, so they'll help others, but they also expect something in return.
Okay. So they're keeping score.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I tend to be a matcher myself.
Mhm.
I like to help people, but I also, I don't want to be taken advantage of.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this idea that givers can actually end up at the top. I mean, that's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, so his research shows that givers are actually overrepresented at both the top and the bottom of the success ladder.
Okay. So it can go either way.
It can go either way.
Interesting. So let's start with maybe some examples of givers who didn't quite make it to the top.
Okay. So one example that he uses is Lillian Bauer. She was a brilliant consultant, but she really struggled to advance in her career. And the reason was she was too generous.
How can you be too generous?
Well, she was always the first person to volunteer to help.
Right.
She was constantly mentoring her colleagues, taking on extra work,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, she ended up being taken advantage of.
Okay.
Clients would push her around, and colleagues would hesitate to give her critical feedback because they knew she wouldn't push back.
So she basically became a doormat.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's interesting because he talks about how this is especially common for women
Right.
who are often socialized to be more giving and nurturing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it can backfire in a professional setting if you're not careful.
So how do you avoid that trap?
Well, that's where the concept of being otherish comes in,
Okay.
which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But for now, let's focus on the positive side of giving.
Okay. I'm ready for some inspiration.
Okay, so let's contrast Lillian with another giver, Jason Geller, who worked at Deloitte.
Hmm.
So Jason also had this strong desire to help others, but he used his generosity strategically. He created a knowledge-sharing system called JNet, which basically made him a human Google for his colleagues.
Wow.
So if anyone had a question, they could go to Jason and he'd have the answer.
Yeah.
And this helped him build a reputation as an expert and a valuable asset to the company.
So he was giving, but in a way that also benefited him.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just about blindly giving to everyone.
No, it's about being strategic about who you help.
Right.
And Grant calls this sincerity screening.
Sincerity screening.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're basically trying to weed out the takers, the people who are just going to use you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, there are some techniques that we can dive into later, but for now, let's look at some broader examples of successful givers outside of the corporate world.
Okay. I'm all ears.
All right, so think about Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Now, you don't often think of politicians as being givers,
No, not really.
but Lincoln was actually known for surrounding himself with rivals, people who challenged him,
Interesting.
and this ultimately helped him make better decisions for the country.
Okay, so he was putting the needs of the nation above his own ego.
Exactly.
Wow, that's true leadership.
Then there's George Meyer, who was a legendary comedy writer for The Simpsons.
Oh, I love The Simpsons.
Yeah, he was known for taking on all the unglamorous tasks, the behind-the-scenes work that nobody else wanted to do,
Okay.
simply because he cared about making the show the best it could be.
So he was a giver in a very humble way.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And finally, there's John Huntsman Sr., who's a billionaire businessman,
Okay.
and he attributes his massive success to his lifelong commitment to giving. He actually argues that giving made him rich, not the other way around.
Wow, that's a radical idea.
Yeah, it challenges that whole notion of success first giving back later.
Right.
He's saying no giving is actually what drives success.
Okay. I'm starting to see the potential here, but I also know that the book explores the dark side of reciprocity, right? The takers?
Yeah, we can't ignore the takers.
Okay, so tell me about the takers. Who's the poster child for taking?
Well, the prime example he uses is Ken Lay, the CEO of Enron.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Enron was a massive scandal, corporate greed and deception at its worst.
Yeah, that name still sends chills down my spine. So
Mhm.
what made Ken Lay such a classic taker?
Well, he was a master manipulator. He cultivated this public image of generosity,
Right.
but behind the scenes, he was all about self-interest.
Yeah.
He was lavishly spending company money,
Yeah.
rewarding himself and his cronies while driving the company into the ground.
So how do we protect ourselves from these takers?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something we'll definitely dive into in more detail later.
Okay, I'm a little nervous, but I know we have to.
We do.
Yeah. So let's take a deep breath and get ready to explore the dark side of taken.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Ken Lay, right? Master manipulator.
Yeah, a
Uh,
classic example.
Yeah. But I'm thinking, back then it was probably easier to get away with that kind of stuff, right? Before
Mhm.
the internet and social media.
You're absolutely right. I mean, these days, it's much harder for those takers to hide.
Yeah.
Their reputation follows them online.
So it's kind of like Big Brother, but in a good way?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes it harder to deceive people.
Yeah. Okay, so more transparency, more accountability.
Mhm.
I like that. And speaking of things that might surprise us, Grant also talks about this idea of powerless communication.
Oh, yeah. That's a fascinating concept.
It sounds counterintuitive. Doesn't sound very powerful.
It does sound like a contradiction.
Right.
But he makes a compelling case for how communicating in a way that might seem less confident
Right.
can actually make you more influential.
More influential. Okay, so like what? Expressing vulnerability.
Yeah, expressing vulnerability, asking
Fire.
questions,
Really?
talking tentatively, seeking advice.
Okay, so not like being the loudest voice in the room.
No,
Yeah.
it's more about being open and receptive.
Interesting. It's funny you mentioned that because I was just thinking about a job interview I had a few years ago, and I was so nervous, I actually ended up asking the interviewer for advice.
Oh, wow.
I know, but it totally changed the dynamic of the conversation.
Really?
Yeah, they seemed more engaged, more interested in me as a person.
That's a great example of how showing a little vulnerability can actually make you more relatable.
Yeah, it humanizes you.
Exactly. And there's a great story in the book about a trial lawyer named Dave Walton
Okay.
who stutters.
A child lawyer who stutters.
Yeah.
Wow, I think that would be a major disadvantage.
You would think so, right?
Hmm.
But he actually credits his stutter with making him more persuasive.
Really?
Yeah, because it makes him more relatable to the jury.
Huh. So they see him as a real person.
Exactly. Someone who's overcome a challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess we all have our own challenges, right?
Well,
And it's how we deal with them that really matters.
Absolutely. And then there's Bill Grumbles, who became HBO's top salesperson, even though he had no prior sales experience,
Okay, how do you do that?
by asking questions.
Question.
Lots of questions.
So he was like the anti-salesperson.
Yeah, instead of trying to push the product, he was trying to understand the customer's needs.
Right.
He was listening more than he was talking.
That's actually really smart.
It is. It builds trust and rapport.
Okay, so maybe we should all be asking more questions, talking less.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah.
And Grant also talks about the importance of talking tentatively.
Tentatively. Okay, so not being too assertive.
Exactly. There's this advertising executive named Don Lane who was known for this approach.
Okay.
He was always seeking feedback, soliciting ideas from others,
Mm-hmm.
and he never pretended to have all the answers.
So he was creating a more collaborative environment.
Exactly. He valued everyone's input.
I like that. But I'm also wondering, is this just about individuals or can we actually create cultures of giving?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And the book offers some really inspiring examples of how organizations are doing just that.
Okay, give me some examples.
One is the reciprocity ring.
The what?
The reciprocity ring.
Yeah.
It's an exercise where people openly share requests and offers of help with each other.
So it's like a structured way to encourage giving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's been shown to be really effective in fostering a sense of community and generosity.
Okay. And then there's Free Cycle.
Oh, yeah. Free Cycle is awesome.
I love Free Cycle. It's like a giant online giveaway.
It is. And it's a great way to reduce waste and help others at the same time.
Yeah, it's a win-win. And some companies are using tools like the Love Machine.
Oh, yeah. The Love Machine is cool.
So what is that?
It's basically a platform where team members can publicly acknowledge and appreciate each other's acts of giving.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it creates a positive feedback loop.
Yeah, so giving becomes contagious.
Exactly.
Mm,
And it's not just about feel-good vibes.
right.
There's actually evidence that cultures of giving lead to better business outcomes.
Okay, so it's good for the bottom line too.
It is.
Yeah.
But I know what you're thinking.
I
This
agree.
all sounds great, but how do I actually apply it to my own life?
Yeah. I was just thinking that I'm not a CEO or a social movement leader.
Right.
I'm just trying to navigate my own little world.
Well, one simple but powerful thing you can do is embrace the power of 5-minute favors.
5-minute favors.
Yeah.
5-minute favors. What are we talking about here?
Well, it's based on the idea that we can all make a difference, even if we're super busy,
Right.
by just taking a few minutes each day to do something helpful for someone else.
Okay, so like what?
Like, connecting someone with a potential client, or offering to proofread a colleague's presentation, or, just listening to someone who's having a tough day.
Right. Those little things can go a long way.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't have to be a huge time commitment.
Yeah, 5 minutes. I can spare 5 minutes.
Right. It's about giving a habit a part of your daily routine.
Okay, I like that. So it's not about waiting until you're successful to start giving back.
No, it's about making giving part of your journey.
Yeah, and those small acts of generosity can really add up over time.
They do. It creates a ripple effect.
And remember those smile cards we talked about?
Oh, yeah.
Those are a perfect example of a 5-minute favor.
Absolutely. You could just leave one behind after you've helped someone out.
It's a nice way to encourage them to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. It spreads the generosity.
So I'm curious, where do you see yourself on this give-or-taker spectrum?
Well, I think most people, including myself, kind of fluctuate depending on the situation.
Right.
But I try to lean towards being what Grant calls otherish.
Otherish?
Yeah. It's about finding that sweet spot between being completely selfless and completely selfish.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our interests and the interests of others aren't always in conflict.
So it's like win-win.
Exactly. We can find ways to help others that also benefit us.
I like that. It seems more sustainable than trying to be a saint all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, nobody's perfect.
We're all human.
We are. And the book actually gives some examples of how this otherish approach can influence even the most hardcore takers. Yeah, there's this study about energy consumption.
Okay.
And they found that the most effective way to get people to conserve energy was to tell them how much energy their neighbors were using.
Oh, so it appealed to their sense of competition.
Exactly.
Mm.
And their desire to fit in.
Interesting. So we can kind of nudge people towards giving even if they're naturally inclined to take.
It's possible. And it gives me hope that we can create a more giving world.
Yeah, it's not about preaching at people.
No.
It's about creating environments where giving is the norm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can all play a role in that.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
And I'm definitely going to be thinking more about how I can incorporate these ideas into my own life.
Yeah. I encourage everyone to do the same.
So what are you giving more thought to now?
That's a great question. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into give and take. And we'll see you next time.
See you later.